Hello, friends. I'm finally writing a book to codify the basis for my signature Mike Rochelle and Associates Corporate Leadership Accelerator course. And I need an upvote from you to gain favorable publishing status. It is co-titled Growing the Next Version of You, the LeadershipN Accelerator, a journey for growing success in life, love, and leadership. Greetings and welcome to the Growing the Next Version of You show. Every week or so, I get together with thought leaders and we talk about the trends that are happening in the world, and we think of life from a mind, body, and spirit perspective, because that's what servant leaders do. So join me. Well, hello, everyone. This is Mike Rochelle here on Growing the Next Version of You with Dr. Judy Glick-Smith. Judy, it's been a while since we've met. How are you doing, and where are you today?
Well, I am sitting in my home in Cumming, Georgia, which is about 45 miles north of downtown Atlanta.
Okay.
I am doing fine, although I do have some things to tell you about what's going on with me, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay.
But I'm still doing my consulting work and writing my fifth book.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I pretty much have crafted a life that's very fun, and it's kind of neat. I like it.
Very cool. Well, Judy, we'll get into who you are and where you come from in just a moment, but I'd like to ask really quickly, what are your top 3 tips for 2023?
Well, as you know, Mike, I am all into being in flow. So my top number 1 is that I encourage people to try to maximize their flow states, which results in a better feelings of well-being and productivity and just happiness in general.
Sure.
That's number 1. Number 2, I'm reading a book that was written by Vivek Murthy, who is our Surgeon General, and it's called Together. And it's about the loneliness epidemic in not just in our country, but in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's all about, the tip is to build community for yourself.
Sure.
And we can get into that if you want to explore that a little bit. Definitely. And the third thing has really become huge in my life, and that for a lot of reasons. But I am so distressed about the level of mean-spiritedness in the world. And I would like, my other tip is to just practice loving kindness every day. So, and all it is, and sometimes all you need to do is smile at somebody to practice loving kindness. So definitely, those are my 3 tips.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for that. As I recall, you had a relative that was somewhat into the peace movement. Is that not correct?
My grandfather was pre-peace movement.
Okay.
Okay, but he was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 1981.
Wow.
And he didn't get it, but he was nominated. He had been in the World Council of Churches for 10 years. He was active in the Church of the Brethren, which is the church that I grew up in. It's Church of the Brethren is one of the 3 historic peace churches, which you've got the Mennonites and the Brethren and the Quakers. in that little trifecta. And so he was the general secretary for the Church of the Brethren, and then he went to Geneva, Switzerland for 10 years to be a representative with the World Council of Churches, and then later on in his life, he was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. So that's kind of what that connection is.
That's very cool. Very cool. Well, Judy, when you and I met, which had to be in about 1999 or 2000.
Oh, I think it was before that.
Well, I know I was trying to remember one of the fun things. Yeah, it may have been. I moved to Dallas in '99.
Well, maybe it was.
Yeah, so probably for about a year before I was coming in as they were building my house. But I was a member of SIM and I started the RLF. So pretty much as soon as I got here, you started coming and speaking to my students. And that's where we got to know each other quite well.
Right.
You moved to Atlanta in what year?
2000. I moved back here in 2004.
2004. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was about 5 years that we were actively engaged together. You had a business that back then doing documentation for systems.
Right.
And I was, at that time, I was primarily just doing CRM consulting in that era of my life.
Right.
But I was leading the leadership forum, and every year you would come to speak. Powerful. One of my best memories with you personally, and I cannot remember which birthday it was. You'll have to tell me, because my son, who's now 22, was 18 months old.
Oh my!
So it was at least 19, somewhere around that time period, and you had it at a barn. And there were horses.
Oh, yeah, that was my 50th birthday.
It was your 50th, okay.
That would have been 2001, July of 2001.
Okay, that about 18, somewhere a year, 18 months old, something like that.
Right.
And he was deathly afraid of the little pony or horse or wherever you're trying to put him on. We finally got him sitting on it so we could take a picture. I'm gonna I'll find that picture and see if I can put it in the show later. But you were always generous with your time. You came every year that I asked you, and actually you've come back a couple of times to different events that I've had and spoken about books that you've written and things like that. So, from a community perspective, that second tip that you gave, you live that, right? It's not something that you just talk about. But let's go back in community, all the way back to the beginning of Judy Glick-Smith. Where were you born? Who were your parents? Kind of what were your both community and philosophical influences, and then from there work us up to the present. And if there are stories that I remember that I may point you in that direction again, if you're willing and able to go there.
Sure. Well, I was born on July 1st, 1951, in Richmond, Virginia. My daddy became a doctor that day.
Oh, wow.
He finished his residency the day I was born. And we moved to the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, which in a little tiny town called Broadway. And he set up a clinic with his best friend, Bill Hotchkiss. And the Hotchkisses had a little girl 10 days before me who became my absolutely best friend in the whole wide world. And so they had 6 kids. We had 6 kids. And so it was we lived on a hill, and it was a chaotic, wonderful childhood that was, you never felt unsafe. There was plenty of room to run and play and get into stuff. And eventually I had horses. Marianne had horses. She's the woman I was telling you about. And so we would get on our horse and just be gone all day. I mean, pack a ham sandwich and go. Yeah. So it was just an idyllic childhood when I look back on it. forgot where I was going with that. But
chaotic childhood, I think, is what
yeah, it was just really, I just think back on it, and it was just wonderful. The town was tiny. There were only 200 people in my graduating high school class.
And what was the town again?
Broadway.
Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, and I run a Zoom call every month with all the people that I went to high school with. So that's been kind of fun. We started doing that in COVID, and it's kind of fun to hear the stories and hear how other people were growing up when, it's just kind of interesting.
Right.
But church was a big thing in my childhood. I mean, both my grandfathers were ministers, so we went to church every Sunday. My mother was the choir director. My dad was a deacon. It was that kind of thing in a small town in rural Virginia. So my foundational stuff comes out of that spiritual practice that is the Church of the Brethren. And it is focused primarily on peace and love and servant leadership, although it wasn't called that at the time. But my daddy always demonstrated that my dad and my mom demonstrated that to me every day of their lives. Right. So that was, I guess, a huge influencer on me. My dad was one of 12, but my mom only had a brother. So, my family is huge. So family is really a big thing with me also. So I went to high school, came out of high school. I loved horses. I was riding and training Tennessee walking horses in my high school years. And I'd get my homework done. Daddy would take me to the barn. I would be at the barn until 9 or 10 at night, and then riding whatever they wanted. I was just a little barn rat. That's what we called the kids that would go ride in the barn. And they just put me on anything, and I would just take off. It was awesome. But my first job out of high school was to be a dude wrangler on the Skyline Drive of Virginia. I went, if you're the Blue Ridge Parkway, part of it is called the Skyline Drive up around where I'm from. Mm-hmm. And there are two areas, there's Skyland and Big Meadows. And I was a dude wrangler at Big Meadows. And so I would take people out on rides. And I did that 6 days a week all summer. And that was heaven for me. Got paid $200 a month plus room and board. It was, wow. I thought I was rich. Yeah. So then I went to college. I wasn't ready and ended up getting pregnant and having my daughter. Mm-hmm. And married my high school sweetheart. And we were together for a few years, but that just didn't take. And then I moved to Atlanta while we were married, we were in East Tennessee, where I went to school at East Tennessee State University and majored in fine arts. Okay. But I never got the degree. I had 3 years of fine arts, and then decided I wanted to go into fashion design. This shows you how you can either say that I am totally confused or I'm very well-rounded. Right. So I came to Atlanta to get a degree in fashion design in 1974, I think. Okay. And I finally got that associate degree in 75. And but I could not afford to go to New York City, which is where, if you're going to be in fashion, that's where you had to go. And I had a baby, and I was a single mom. So I went to work as a secretary for Pete Marwick. which is now KPMG.
Right.
And I stayed with Pete Marwick for 4 years, I think, as secretary in the tax department. And decided to go back to school in 1977. And because I was writing offer letters for these kids coming out of school, and they were getting paid big bucks, $18,000 a year.
Oh.
And I said, I'm going to go be an accountant. And so I went back to school, Georgia State, to get a degree in accounting. And I held up my end of the curve. I was not good at accounting. Everybody said, you'll be good at accounting because you're good at math. It has nothing to do with math.
Right.
At all. You have to know the rules, But while I was in school, I discovered computers. And that was all she wrote, man. Once I discovered computers, I knew that's where I wanted to go. So I got all my electives in information systems. So I basically had a double major in accounting and information systems. So, and that was back in the day where you had to punch your own cards,
right?
Leave them, this was 1977. Yeah. So I decided I was going to try to find a job as a systems analyst or a programmer. And I start every lunchtime. I was out pounding the pavement, and I happened to find out that Atlanta Gas Light had laid off, or they had lost 5 people in 2 weeks, which should have told me something, but they needed people and they were willing to train. And so I got a job. I actually took a cut in pay to go to work as a programmer for them, but I knew that very quickly I would recoup that. And so I went to work for them, became an assembler programmer, CICS, command level and macro level, and learned Fortran on the job because they were pushing gas through the pipelines using Fortran. So I had to learn Fortran. I had to learn all the business technologies, which was business applications were done in assembler back then.
Right.
An IBM 360. We even had a machine. I didn't know how to do this. I never learned how to do it, but it was a machine that was on a board, or a program that was on a board, and you had to wire it.
Wow.
And put it into the machine. So,
right.
So I can, there was a time where I could debug a system reading a hex stump. And I loved that. But what I found was, while I was really good at it, I wasn't fast. And you had to be fast and accurate, but the stress of it and being on call. The last time I was on call, it was because payroll went down and I had to go in and figure out what somebody else had done. And I'm going like, I am not doing this. So what I wanted to do was document those systems so that the next person that got called at 2:00 in the morning didn't have to go through what I did.
Right.
And so I went out on my own. Well, I went from Atlanta Gas Light to Atlanta Newspapers. And there I was I was on COBOL on the circulation system at Atlanta Newspapers. And I got to do a couple of inside consulting gigs, evaluating systems. Like they wanted to get word processing systems, and this is before PCs. So we were looking at IBM 5520. We looked at Wang's. We looked at, all these different systems that were out there for word processing. And I was the go-to person. Although the IBM salesman did not want to he would not even shake my hand when I met him, even though I was the lead on. And I said, he was so not happy that I was a woman doing this. He just would not even talk to me, which
Yeah.
was
So Judy, and you literally, I mean, he wouldn't look at you in the eye and things like that, right? So I was just at Elevate IT, and we had a women in IT panel there, and the ladies that were there were talking about experiences that they had. I think your era was probably even tougher on women than what these ladies have gone through. Right. So I mean, it was from that perspective, that guy it was just beneath him to talk to
yes,
somebody that was not a man. Right.
yeah. Men
So,
were always the decision makers.
right. But you've dealt with this your whole career.
My
So,
whole career.
so how do you deal with it now? Do you still run into it, or is it kind of waning in your experience now?
I just don't mess with it anymore. If they don't want to work with me, fine. Go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that kind of stress. That's on them. It's we said we weren't going to cuss, but I could say,
Tell them where to go, right?
I mean, it's like you're lost, man.
So just so everybody knows, Judy is not the one that was saying that she would cuss. I said every once in a while I will cuss and I will go and edit that out, but I'm not going to. But that's the kind of friends we are, so we could be that open.
But yeah, when I went to work at Atlanta Gaslight, they were all men before I came. And when they lost all those people, they hired 3 women in their place.
They were desperate.
Yes. And I came in one morning and there was a book laying open on my desk that was a Christian-based book. And it was open to a page that said, women don't need to understand why water boils. They just need to know that it will eventually. And I knew who did it. And I just closed it up, put it back on his desk and said, here you go. But, that's the world we came out of. The 50s
Right.
was right there. So,
yeah.
But anyway, so then I was at Atlanta Gaslight and then Atlanta Newspapers, which was really fun. I liked working for the newspaper because, the product was everybody sat around and read the newspaper every morning because that was our product, so that was kind of fun. But then I decided I heard about consulting and independent contracting. That was kind of just getting started. And I thought, that's what I want. I really just don't I've never been a corporate person. I just like the idea of having some freedom to even though I work all the time anyway, but I'm working for me.
Right.
So I went out on my own. I learned about a contract at Georgia Power, and I got the job. It was a technical writing job, and the fellow who hired me because I could program. Mm-hmm. And because he said if he couldn't find me a technical writing job, he could find me a programming job. But I never programmed again after that because it was right on the cusp of where people were realizing they needed documentation. Mm-hmm. So not just end user documentation, but what I wanted to focus on was documentation for programmers in a maintenance environment. And that's what I focused my work on and my marketing and all that. So
what year did you start your own company then?
Well, I was independent in 83,
okay,
but I didn't really start a for real business until I moved to Texas in 87.
Okay.
So my ex-husband worked for IBM. This is my second husband. He worked for IBM, and we moved to Texas in 1987.
Right.
And I did not want to go to work for somebody, so I marketed like a mad woman from Atlanta for about 6 months, and found a gig with the system. What it was called, the System Center, I think. It was over off of Beltline. And they have, let me think, hold on. Oh, I should look this up. They still have a product that is used in the IBM mainframe world. And they need somebody to document it at a code level, because the guy that did it was the guy who created this system. It was a system for moving big blocks of information, big blocks of data. Oh man, it's driving me crazy. I can't think of what it's called now, because I bet you'd know it. But anyway, when I went to interview for the job, they asked me, how do you deal with screamers? I said, what?
So the guy that wrote this thing was a screamer, huh?
Yeah, he was a piece of work. But the systems guys always were. They're very, I mean, when I was at Atlanta newspapers, there was a guy that I was writing standards for Atlanta newspaper, and I had to go talk to the guy who was the systems programmer. He weighed about 300 pounds. Nobody wanted to ride on the elevator with him in the summertime. I mean, it was bad. But I went down to his office and asked him if we could have a chat. And his office, he was a listings hoarder. Have you ever run into somebody like that? His whole office was full of listings, and he had made a maze. You had to walk through the maze to get back to his desk, which was in the far corner. And all the chairs had listings on them. And I just brazen went back there and sat down and had a conversation with him, and found out he drove a Corvette, and he just had this other side of him that was so interesting. So the systems guys are fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So when I got to the System Center, I met this guy, and I was reading assembler code, writing the documentation for it. And I would take it in his office and say, could you review this for me? And he would say, it doesn't do that. And he would say a few choice words, but I said, well, in the code right here, it looks like it really does. And then he'd kind of grumble a little bit, and he'd either confirm or tell me what it really was or whatever. But with him, I found out, I did a little fishing about him, found out he played in the Fort Worth Symphony.
Wow.
And I walked in his office one day and I said, I didn't know you played in the Fort Worth Symphony. I said, what's up with that? And he softened and became my friend, and I never had a problem with him after that. So it's all about, that's that building connection,
right,
kind of thing, trying to find out some kind of commonality, right, between the two of you so you can get your work done, So I stayed with the System Center for a while, all the while networking, ASM, DPMA. I wasn't allowed in SIM at that point. But, I was just networking like a mad woman. And I ran into Charlie Kite, who was the CIO for Nations Bank. And he and I just hit it off. And he hired me after a System Center project ended. I came in and worked on his demand deposit accounting system, documenting that at a code level. And then it got so huge. And he said to me, he said, well, hire somebody else to come help you. And I said, I can't. I don't think I make enough money an hour. He said, well, charge me more money. And it was like he became a mentor, a business mentor of sort. And he gave me a big enough raise that I could hire people. And then it kind of clicked,
right?
How to do this. So
he basically taught you how to scale.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Did you have a name for it by then, or was that
Oh,
still?
yeah.
What was the name of it? I don't remember anymore.
Integrated documentation.
That was it. Yeah. Okay.
And the name of it was that because if you don't integrate that documentation process into your system development life cycle, all you're doing is taking a snapshot.
Right.
And as soon as you make a change to the system and don't change the documentation is a lie and nobody will trust it anymore. Yeah. And that was the hardest sell. People wanted me to come in and take a snapshot, but they didn't want to teach their programmers then how to continue that work so that they could keep that or hire me, whatever. They didn't want to commit to it. And it's expensive. When you document a system on the back end, it costs 3 times as if you had done it when you first did it.
Sure.
So, but it was a hard sell. And, but we made it. We grew from just me to, I had 25 people when 9/11 happened, I had 25 people working for me.
Right.
And we did just about anything people wanted us to do. And I had to lay off all those people within an 8-month period because after 9/11, we had the dot-com bust.
Right.
We had 9/11. And then we had the outsourcing start.
Right.
And it just cratered us.
Gutted everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see your cowboy hat in the back, or cowgirl hat in the back there, and your lasso. So when I met you, you actually wore cowboy boots and a hat everywhere you went. It was kind of like your signature look. So
right.
There's a story behind that. So while you're building this business, something happened. So can you walk us through that story too?
Yes, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1995, March 15th, Ides of March, 1995. And I had about 8 people working for me at that point. And I told them, I said, well, if I got to go through chemo, I'm going to need y'all to, keep the business going. And they did. And we had the best year we ever had up to that point that year. But I was able to continue the business thanks to them. Yeah. But I lost my hair. I lost my hair, and I was in Texas, and it was summer, and there was no way I was going to wear a wig. So, and since I grew up a cowgirl, I said, you know what? I live in Texas. I got rid of all my Mark Shell suits. I went straight West Texas lady rancher look.
She did too.
And I had 17 nice cowboy hats. We're not talking the cheap ones that you buy at the rodeo. These were nice cowboy hats. And I had about 11 pairs of boots and all the matching clothes that go with it. So that was me. It became my brand. Although I lost a contract. I never had the contract. We went and bid on a project at American Airlines and we didn't get it, but I couldn't figure out why we didn't get it. And Maurice, my business partner, he said, I'm going to call him and find out why we didn't get that project. We should have had it. And they told him they didn't like that I was wearing a cowboy hat. at American, and in between Fort Worth and Dallas. So Maurice let her have it. He said, I'll have you know she's going through chemo and she has no hair on her head. And he just let that woman have it. And she probably felt this big, but
so Judy, I still do leadership development, right? And I don't know how many people I have told the story about just sit and be. Do you remember that? Remember that term?
Yeah,
so,
my sister.
Yeah. So can you kind of share that?
Yeah.
You have to set up the context for it because it's a powerful story.
My sister was going through chemo for the second time for breast cancer. Mm. She was originally diagnosed when she was 35, I think. Mm. And she was she was about 4 years younger than me. And so she told me when I was going to have to go through, when I told her I was going to have to do chemo, she told me, you're just going to have to learn how to sit and be. And because she said, you're not going to be able to read, you're not going to be able to watch TV, you're not going to be able to do anything, engage in anything, because your brain's going to be so foggy. And so just learn how to sit and be. And so I did. I learned how to do that. And I still practice that. If I get stressed, if I do a lot of breath work, I do yoga every morning. So that I do meditations. And it's really helpful to make your way in the world when stressful things happen.
Right. Yeah. Sit and be. Thankfully, I have not had to go through cancer myself, but it was an instructive story. So thanks for sharing it yet again.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you're here in Texas. You survived the downturn of your business, and then what happens next?
Well, the big downturn. I survived the first Gulf War, but I didn't survive the second one. So I had to lay off. Maurice and I laid off 25 people in 8 months. We kept the business open for 2 years, blew through as slowly as we could all of our reserves. And eventually we had to come to the conclusion that it just wasn't going to come back fast enough. And so we closed the business in 2003. I, at that point, and in the meantime, my marriage fell apart. Whole lot of stuff happened. And my daughter was going through a hellacious divorce here in Atlanta. And so I just decided to come back to Atlanta. And I was working for T-System, which is a company in Dallas that does medical. They have medical charting software. So I told them I worked for them full time for a while, as long as I could stand it. And it wasn't because of them; it's because of me. I just don't do corporate. I don't play the politics very well. But they wanted to keep me on as a contractor. So I came back to Atlanta in 2004 and kept working for T-System until 2006. And I had decided to go back to school and get my master's, because I had a goal to get my PhD before I turned 60. And I was 54, I think, when I decided, well, I better get busy if I'm going to make it. Yeah. So, and I didn't have a master's degree. So I went back and decided to go to Kennesaw. I didn't want to do business. It just didn't, it felt like been there, done that. And so I found a program in conflict management at Kennesaw, and I thought that would be kind of interesting to do. And so that was a brick and mortar. Every weekend I was at Kennesaw taking classes and got through that in 2006. And then then I found the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, which was an online program, and they had a degree in transformation. Transformative studies is what it's called. Awesome. And it was a transdisciplinary degree, which allows you to look at an area of inquiry from any angle. So I wasn't limited to psychology or physics or religion or anything like that. I could look at anything I wanted to inform my question.
Kind of a bake your own program.
A bake my own program, which is really freaking hard.
Yeah.
Because it gives you almost too much freedom.
Well, there's no guide rails.
No guide rail.
You have to make it up as you go.
Yep. And it's hard to teach in because your professor has to kind of tune into where you are. So, and we had probably 40 people in the cohort. So it was, to teach in that program I can't even imagine having to keep up with what everybody's looking at. And we're all looking at different areas of inquiry also. But we did it through the lens of transformation. And there is a body of literature on transformation. Sure. So that was kind of our golden thread throughout.
Okay.
So, and as I'm going, so it was 2 years of coursework. And then when you get done with your coursework, theoretically, you should have your literature review done and have a question in mind that you want to study. And then you spend a year or so writing a proposal. And then you spend a couple of years doing the research and writing your dissertation. So, and I kind of fell into that schedule. A lot of people, I have friends, though, that went through the program with me who have never finished. I have some friends who finished in a year. I don't know how they did that, but, it just depends on your level of commitment and whether you're in love with what you're doing, which I was.
Right.
So I discovered this idea of flow as I was going through the literature on transformation. But I was interested, and what I was interested in studying was decision making, because in the corporate world, I had seen so many bad decisions being made and could not figure out why. People, particularly in IT.
Yeah.
And because that was my space, so, and it just drove me nuts. And I thought, why do people make the decisions they do? So as I'm going down these rabbit holes on decision making and transformation, and I find this idea of flow, which comes out of the world of positive psychology.
Right.
And it had been very well researched by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, Martin Seligman, and a bunch of other people. And there were actually very set characteristics of flow. And I happened to mention it to my brother-in-law, who was a retired battalion chief from Prince William County Fire Rescue.
Right.
And he stopped me as I was giving him the characteristics of flow. And he said, I want to tell you a story. And he told me the story of Kyle Wilson, who was a firefighter who died in the line of duty on my brother-in-law's watch. And my brother-in-law had to make the call not to rescue Kyle. And I realized all the characteristics of flow were in my brother-in-law's decision-making process.
Right.
So my question became, does being in a flow state facilitate decision-making?
Hmm.
And I went back to my committee and I said, I want to look at fire and EMS and firefighters in a flow state when they have to make a random. Oh my God, where did that come from? I have not ever, other than being around Steve, I've never been around firefighters.
Right.
And so it was so out of my sphere of expectation for myself.
Right.
And Mike, I am a goal setter.
Right.
I have my goals down. I know what I'm doing from year to year, and I stick to it. And this wasn't even on my radar. But when I made the decision to go this way, doors began to fly open. It was crazy. It was the definition of learning of faith, I guess, because I had to trust that I was on the right path. Actually, at times felt like I was in the middle of this bright tunnel and there's this beautiful light out in front of me and there's this golden hook in my chest pulling me forward and I can't see where I'm going. That's kind of how I felt.
Right. So Judy, and I think, I mean, knowing you for as long as I have, and sharing some of the same characteristics, I think that you've shared about yourself, right? I don't like politics either. I like new challenges regularly. I'm a goal setter,
Yes.
All that stuff. So I would say that likely you in that moment were in your own flow state.
Was.
Yeah. So can you define a little better for those who have not read the literature what flow means?
Sure.
How does it happen? Is it always in your self transcendent self? Is it in the self-actualization self? Where does it come and how do you create that flow state for yourself?
Everybody experiences it from time to time. Mm-hmm. So let me give you the characteristics of it. So flow is when you're working on an activity where you have clear goals and you are receiving feedback in the moment so that you know that you're on the right path.
Right.
There are lots of opportunity for decisive action. The idea that awareness and action merge. For example, one of my firefighter friends told me she was in a restaurant with her family one evening, and she caught out of the corner of her eye, she saw a little boy choking. Mm. And she said she doesn't remember moving from her table to where that little boy was. Mm. So that's the idea that awareness and action are the same.
Sure. And time is not necessarily a constant in this situation.
Correct.
Right.
There's temporal distortion.
Right.
Some people say time speeds up. Some people say it slows down. Some are hyper aware of time, like surgeons who have to do a particular surgery will know exactly, without having to look at the clock, how long time has passed to get it done. Mm. Some people say they just have no concept of time. So it's different for everybody.
Sure.
Another characteristic is that you are, you feel in control. Now, Csikszentmihalyi says you might not really be in control. It's the idea that you feel like you're in control.
But that thing that you were talking about, like there's a hook in your chest and you're being pulled through it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily you that's doing it. It's
right.
It's your destiny. It's your calling. It's your energy. How would you describe that?
I kind of attribute it to some kind of universal energy kind of thing. I mean, it's not, I didn't get into my current faith or spirituality earlier, but it kind of has to do with that. I think I'm not
Well, go there if that's what you need in order to explain what you're saying. I was going to ask you that earlier, and I forgot to anyway. So we know that you came from the Church of the Brethren. That's kind of where you grew up. But then how have you progressed through that? And then we'll get back to the flow state thing.
Okay. So we'll jump over here.
Yeah.
Do a different slide, which is a terminology they use in fire and EMS training. So back to the spirituality slide.
Right.
I was a product of the 70s. I looked at Buddhism and all the other religions and just kind of explored.
Right.
When I grew up, the Church of the Brethren still is kind of a mainstay for me, but I don't go to church. I'm not a
base. Right.
Yeah, it's a base.
Right.
But my thinking has evolved away from an old white man with a big beard sitting in the clouds, which is what the Sunday school literature showed us. Pictures.
Sure.
Okay. And that I'm not there.
Right.
My current.
Have you seen The Shack? The movie The Shack?
No. Is that something I should watch?
I would love for you to watch it, and then we can have another conversation about it.
Okay.
It's a kind of a hard story. I'm not going to go through the whole details, but the whole point is that God is a woman in the interaction with God that this guy has. So that's why I was asking if that's what
it's on Netflix.
I don't know, but I'll find out as soon as we get off. I'll find it for you.
Okay. So the problem that I have with religion as a dogma and that kind of stuff, the rules.
Religion.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
I just, people want to set rules for themselves. I mean, Bob, my ex-husband, when we were splitting up, he had never been anybody that would go to church, but he felt a need to reconnect or to connect with some source that was spiritual, and he did not want me to go with him. He wanted to find this on his own, and he settled on Church of Christ. And I asked him, why did you choose Church of Christ? And I was truly just curious.
Sure.
And he said, because they know the rules. And I went, okay, if there's only one interpretation of the rules, there would not be all these religions out there.
Right.
But okay, fine. So that's kind of where he settled. But my thinking is there is an intelligence in the universe, but I do feel like I have choice, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, I was just looking up a book because every time I have this conversation with somebody, I refer to this book because it so well summarizes kind of that I'm in a similar place that you are. I mean, I'm a Christian by belief set primarily, right? But I have in my way of looking at things, I have an opening for other people's faith too, because I can't claim that I know everything, right?
Right. We don't.
Things that I know that I don't know. And then there's a bigger area that I don't know that I don't know, right?
Right.
This guy, and I finally found his name. It's Brian McLaren. He wrote a book called A Generous Orthodoxy.
I've heard of that. I have not read it.
It's an excellent book. I actually have it on Audible, so I don't have the cover because he basically goes through all of the different places that he either went as a parishioner or as a pastor or went to a friend's faith, including Jewish and Muslim and other things. But he basically says, and he names pretty much all of the different factions of what Christianity could be.
Yeah.
And then he says, an unfinished Christian, right? And I'm like, I can relate to that, right?
Yeah,
Because
I can too.
so much more open,
Yes.
right? So Bob, it was Bob, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, his answer is what a lot of people answer, right? Because at some
Right.
level, when they go to a place that resonates with who they are, and see, that's why I think there are all these facets of difference within the Christian faith. Jewish congregations are not all the same. Muslim
Right.
congregations are not all the same.
Islam has
Hindu,
got different factions to it. Yeah.
exactly. So they're all
Yeah.
so there is so much difference in who we are, right? We're all, I
Mhm.
believe, we're all one of one. There's nobody like Judy. There's nobody like Mike. Everybody is one of one, made uniquely in the image of God. Whatever
Yes.
way you want to think of that, right?
Right.
So is that kind of where, does that resonate?
It
Yeah,
absolutely does.
I figured it would.
Let me tell you, in a nutshell,
Yeah,
there is a saying in Buddhism called namaste.
yeah,
And namaste means the God in me recognizes the God in you.
right.
And that's kind of where I come at it.
Yeah. And
That's
so,
in a
so for
nutshell.
some Christians, that's a hard thing to hear because
Yeah,
they don't,
because they keep God separate.
right.
God
But
is separate. You've got the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost,
I know,
and they're
but the
all
whole,
separate.
but if you read the New Testament, it says that whenever you believe in God, that He is in you, right?
Right.
Jesus says, God, make them one like we are one. Well, in order to do that, that would mean that you would have to have Him, and this is in the words of the Bible, indwell you, right? The Holy Spirit would actually have to be in you. So that doesn't offend me at all, right?
No,
Because
me
I
too.
think theologically that's a relatively safe phrase.
Yes.
So I'll do the namaste thing with people. It's not that I am 100% agreeing with exactly what they say, but I do believe
Right. No, it's
there's
just
only
it's a
one.
recognition
Yeah.
that they're part of they're we're all one
Well,
together.
at one point there was only a man and a woman that started it all, right? So,
Theoretically.
well,
I
there
don't
was
know that that's true.
but I mean, if you think about it, there had to be a beginning, and at the beginning, there was a couple of people, and
Yeah.
then they had a couple of people, and then they had a couple more people, and like that old Clairol commercial said, and they told two people, and they told two people, and so on and so on, and it just kept on going. So we're all brothers and sisters.
Right.
We have different colors, we have different ways of being and believing, but we are connected, right? We can't
Right.
get away from it. We all live on this same little ball that floats around the sun.
Oh my God. It's amazing to me that people don't the fighting and the mean spiritedness
Right,
and the cruelty
right,
that happens on this planet.
right.
It's so mind-boggling and so upsetting to me
Yes,
because we're all here together.
yeah, yeah.
So
And I think you and I are similar in that we look for positive outlets for that frustration, right?
yeah, I do.
Instead of letting it consume you, you decide you're going to go do something in your power to
In
get
my
something
little
done.
sphere.
Exactly.
Yep.
So that's why I started the show, and I was so excited yesterday when you on Facebook said, "Hey Mike, when are you going to have me on your show?" And I'm like, "Wow, I didn't even think about that. Let's do it tomorrow." And you said yes. So likewise, a couple of years ago, when everybody was being hateful to each other on social media, and everybody was pointing fingers and saying bad things about each other, I'm like, what is something that we can do that celebrates people like you who are servant leaders? So even though your grandfather didn't coin that phrase, you're now the third generation of servant leaders in your family, at least, to reach out to a broken place and try to make it a better place. And
I
that's
I, I just think we got to counter with positive content. I mean
that's right.
that's the only thing I can think of is just to keep countering
Yeah.
with the positive content.
Do you know who Greg Braden is? Have you ever read
Yes.
it? So have you listened to some?
Have you read his book, How the Isaiah Effect?
I don't know if I've read that one. My wife has a couple of his books. I've read it. I've listened to him more than I've read.
Okay.
He has podcasts on YouTube and Spotify and stuff. But he references in one of his books, I have it, it's on Audible as well. I don't remember which one it is, that there was a study at Princeton where they had a group of people that would pray for a particular city. And they would say, okay, we're going to focus, and these are people from all over the world, right? Yep. We're going to focus on, what was the name of your city? In
Broadway.
Broadway. So we're going to pick it's not, but let's just say they were.
Right.
Right. And they would for months pray for love and peace and light and positivity. And they had some sort of measurement devices. Right. And it would come back that whenever they were praying for that city, the crime rate would go down, and suicide would go down. You know,
and that's out of the Isaiah Effect, which is how to pray.
Okay.
He actually went and translated one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Isaiah scroll, which is not the same as Isaiah in the Bible. Right. It's a different book.
Okay.
And it talks about the technology of prayer.
Right.
And it is that people, I didn't tell you the corollary to my breast cancer diagnosis in 1995. It's back.
Oh my, Judy.
So I was diagnosed with a myopathy in 2018. Which is a sickness of the muscles. So my muscles are, and the word necrosis is in the diagnosis, which is really ugly.
That's not.
I'm losing mobility.
Okay.
But it's an autoimmune thing, and one of the side things that can happen is that malignancies can occur. So my breast cancer has come back. So I'm having a double mastectomy on July 12th.
Oh,
so
boy.
people say, well, I'll pray for you. And I'm going like, okay, do it.
Yeah, no, it's kidding.
So, I know when I had it in 95, all people were thinking about me. And I know that's what helped me get through it.
Right.
So, prayer, meditation, alignment with source, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Sending light, if you imagine you're sending light and love to somebody, same thing. It's all the same.
Right.
It's about, and Greg Braden in his book talks about how what you want to do is imagine the person in the final state that you want them to be in. You don't pray for something. Because when you pray for something, you are admitting it doesn't exist now. So you want to pray whatever it is you want to happen.
Right.
Which is a hard thing for people to glom onto. So when my grandchildren, one of the things that I used to tell them is when they went through this really horrible divorce, I would take them to school, and I say, now, before you get out of the car, I want you to close your eyes and imagine having a really good day at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
What does that feel like?
Right.
And that is the prayer.
Right. And then live into it. You're basically stating what the reality is, and then making that reality become. Yeah.
When you can feel it within yourself.
Right.
That is the prayer.
Yeah.
So, and that's what the Isaiah Effect is about.
Okay.
So,
I'll check it out. I have not heard that. Now, we can talk about this a little bit later offline maybe, but have you ever heard of Dr. Jack Cruz?
Mm-mm.
I think he's in Mississippi. He's from Louisiana State University, but he's a neurosurgeon. and a quantum physicist. So
Ooh, I'd like to
he's
read
basically
him.
he's caught himself quantum physics. But his big deal right now is to get into the morning sun, into sunlight, and that all these in my studio right now. I have two big halogen lights on, but I turned my other lights off because he says that we are a blue light toxic species right now. Ever since the 1880s, when Tesla and Westinghouse illuminated the World Fair.
Wow.
All of this light that we are turning on at night
Yes.
is separating us from the circadian rhythm that we were designed to live in. So most of these white lights that we have actually are blue light in frequency.
Yeah.
And that tells us that it's noon every time we look at a light. So if we go into our bathroom at 10 o'clock at night and we turn the light on, we're telling our body it's noon. So, when people have chronic problems trying to sleep and things like that. So anyway, Arlene and I have been on an interesting journey over the last little bit, and I'll share some of that stuff with you. But by and large, and I'll ask everybody that's listening to this, because I think this is going to come out on the 7th. So it'll still be before your surgery, that the outcome that I see for you is a fully healthy Judy without cancer, right?
Yep.
And that's what you're talking about, right? So
that's what I'm talking about.
Pray for what the reality will be, not for the sickness, because by praying for the sickness, you're basically energizing the fact that there is a sickness.
Exactly.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to pray that there is no sickness, that this is the reality will come, that you are 100% cancer free.
Right.
And I think that's in alignment with everything that I've been taught. It turns your thinking around, right?
Yeah.
To pray for what the reality should be rather than what it is.
Right. And
then there's a book, Dr. Charnel, and I can't remember her last name. It's called the Science of Miracles. She also talks about quantum biology and how some of that stuff works. So I'm doing it right now. I'm basically sending you love and light and praying as we're talking, because the cool thing about life, I think in general, and the older we get and the less worried we become about what other people think about who we are or what we do, is that we can live in flow constantly, right? In the Bible, it talks about walking with God. It talks about Abraham walked with God, and everybody can walk with God. You can walk with God, talk with God. You probably don't want to do it out loud all the time. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that either, right? But then in that way, then we're saying, this is the reality that you already know is existing, right?
Yeah.
I'd like that to come for Judy, right? Because that's the way that I'd love her to be able to impact more people. So I'm making you an honorary fire chief. I told you I was going to do this because your book was accepted by this fire organization. So
Fire Chief Magazine named it the #1 public safety leadership book of 2016.
Yeah, and what's the name of that book?
It's called Flow-Based Leadership.
Yeah.
What the best firefighters can teach you about leadership and making hard decisions.
Awesome.
And it's a mashup of my PhD, my dissertation, and follow-up. And I kind of stopped short of telling you about my.
Well, I wanted to get the background behind what you were going to say. So,
okay.
So now we're there. So you're doing your study, and then how did it go? How did it come out? I guess is the way to think.
Well, I went back to my committee and told them I wanted to look at firefighters, and they said, "Okay, go talk to 16 firefighters, 8 men and 8 women. Let's see if they wanted to make sure there wasn't a gender difference." I had the characteristics of flow, and I would sit with them or be on the phone with them or whatever, and I would give them the characteristics, and they would just about jump out of their skin to tell me stories. And I collected 49 stories.
Mm.
I analyzed the heck out of them for 2 years, wrote the dissertation, and I defended 2 weeks short of my 60th birthday, so I made it.
Yay! Another goal accomplished.
And then one of the people that was in my study was David Rhodes, who heads up an extreme experiential training program in fire and EMS called Georgia Smoke Diver. And they are not the guys that jump out of the plane. These are structural firefighters. The purpose of that program is to make firefighters better and to keep them safe, because it teaches them how to get out of extreme situations, so that they don't die on a scene.
Right.
So it's like the equivalent of Navy SEALs Hell Week. It's pretty intense.
Right.
So, but he invited me to a training in November of 2011, and I have been going ever since. I've been to 25 trainings. They've spun off Oklahoma Smoke Diver and Indiana Smoke Diver. I've been to their trainings. I've been to their leadership. I've speak at their leadership conferences, and I've studied them. And I was so impressed with the program and how they've been able to evergreen themselves since 1978. So firefighters have like a 20 to 30 year span. Some of them stay in a little bit longer than that. But they come into this program, and over time, they age out. And once you are not working, if you retire from the fire department, you can't go into the burn building anymore because you aren't covered insurance wise and stuff like that. And so they have to constantly evergreen the next group of leaders to run this program. And now we have, I'm thinking it's around 1,400 smoke divers. When I first started, there were only 400. And now there are 1,000 more just in Georgia. And in Oklahoma and Indiana, there's probably, I think Oklahoma has about 100 now, and Indiana probably has about 200. But so it's a lot of people.
So they're basically being taught how to assess the situation and act in a flow way.
Flow. They don't talk about flow.
Okay.
They're training for situations. So they use the NIOSH reports of line of duty deaths to create new props and new exercises that they do. There, for example, there's a drill that is done all around the world called the Denver drill. And this is a drill that happened as a result of a firefighter in Denver getting caught in a hallway that had a window at the end, and they were firefighters outside that could see that he was down and he was unresponsive, and they couldn't get him out, and he died. But there is a way to get him out. There are methods that have been developed now, and so they teach that. And the hallway was like very narrow, maybe 20 inches. It's really tiny. And so they teach them how to, and they do it incrementally. So early in the week, you're doing components of things, like you learn how to package, what they call package a firefighter. How do you get them ready to save them if they're unresponsive? How do you lift them up? How do you secure them so their legs don't get caught on something? when you're moving them and that kind of thing. And then as the week goes on, things happen, like they'll black out your mask so you can't see. Then you get put in a situation where you have cold smoke. You can't see, but it isn't fire. But then by the end of the week, you're actually doing all these drills in fire. So Thursday is heat day, and and they do simulated flashovers, and they do all kinds of things to really push the student to understand, so that when they get out in the real world, they're just giving them experiential training.
Sure.
So that when they get out there,
already been there, done that.
They've already been there. Yeah.
And their subconscious kind of takes over doing
Muscle
the drill.
memory. Yes. Yeah.
So it's that unconscious. What is it? First, you're consciously unable to do it. Then you're able to do it. I can't remember the exact terminology.
Right.
But then finally, you're unconsciously competent. Competence. That's what it is.
Yes.
And that way you can just do it without thinking. And that way you save your life and the buddy that you have. And then Judy, you actually did this whole thing yourself, right? They put you through.
No, I didn't go through Smoke Diver, but I did go through Axioms of Leadership, which is a firefighter training.
Okay.
Axioms of Leadership was started actually by one of the Smoke Daddies. That Smoke Daddy is the spiritual leader of this Georgia Smoke Diver.
Okay.
So they call him the spiritual leader.
Right.
But so Scott Millsap is he was the fourth Smoke Daddy of Georgia Smoke Diver, and he started a program called Flames, which is a 3-day event that you don't sleep. It's really hard. And then he also started Axioms of Leadership. And so Mo Baxter, who we lost this year to stomach cancer, unfortunately, Mo sat down. We were sitting and talking. He's very. You would have loved talking to him, Mike. He's so much. You and he would have been right on the same page.
Yeah.
But we were at Indiana Smoke Diver, and he and I were having this philosophical conversation, and he said, you ought to go through Axioms. I said, Mo, I have been through it. I have been to Axioms. I can't do that. I said, you got to be strong to go through that. And he said, no, you don't. He said, you don't have to be strong. And I went, okay. And he talked me into it. So I did it. And he was right, because it's more of a leadership program, and your team gets you through it. That's where you learn to trust the people in your team. So I basically became a prop. We would have
carrying you.
Yeah, let's get Judy across here and we'll be okay.
That's awesome.
So, but I met so many wonderful people in that program.
Yeah.
So, but that I have been through that program, but not Smoke Diver. I could never do that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we actually blew past the hour about 7 minutes ago.
No, we didn't bore anybody.
No, not at all. I think it's awesome. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about now? Maybe in the next month or so we can get back together and you can talk about, well, let's do this. We'll say after you're successfully cancer-free,
okay.
We'll reconnect and talk about what it is that you're doing from a business perspective and a lifestyle perspective and all that stuff.
That would be good, because I'm writing this. Every time I do these talks on flow-based leadership, people want to know, how can I maximize my flow states every day?
Right.
And I'm writing that book right now.
Okay.
So we'll get back together and I'll talk about that and talk about how people can do that.
And then just for sake of, if people want to follow you, they can do that on LinkedIn. And then all your books are on Facebook, yeah. And then your books are on Amazon, I'm guessing.
Yes.
So if they just look up Judy Glick-Smith, PhD, will they find the books?
It'll be, just type in Glick-Smith, and I'm the only one.
Glick-Smith.
Yeah.
Glick-Smith.
Yeah.
It's right there spelled.
Right.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm gonna ask right now that you bow your head. I'm gonna go ahead and pray for you now.
Okie dokie.
So, Father in heaven, thank you for Judy. She's been a blessing to hundreds or thousands of people in her career. We ask that you will see her through this cleansing of anything that is ill for her, but we envision her as a purely cancer-free individual in the next few weeks, and we ask that you help to make that a reality. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Judy, until we meet again, I'll talk to you soon, and I'll look forward to some updates on Facebook when you're successfully through this.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right, love you. Talk to you soon.
Love you too. See you later.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hello, friends. I'm finally writing a book to codify the basis for my signature Mike Rochelle and Associates Corporate Leadership Accelerator course. And I need an upvote from you to gain favorable publishing status. It is co-titled Growing the Next Version of You, the LeadershipN Accelerator, a journey for growing success in life, love, and leadership. Greetings and welcome to the Growing the Next Version of You show. Every week or so, I get together with thought leaders and we talk about the trends that are happening in the world, and we think of life from a mind, body, and spirit perspective, because that's what servant leaders do. So join me.